All right, Mike. What are the rules of filming the police in Portland?
Well, I'm an anarchist and I'm not a big fan of rules, but I can provide you some guidelines. First of all, it's very important to give the officer room to work as long as they're not interfering with their First Amendment right to document. It's okay to take us a couple steps back. The way the law works in that regard in Portland, the Oregon Revised Statute is written somewhat like this. If the officer feels threatened or that he can't work or you're distracting him, they can set a boundary for you to be behind, and they'll usually set up police tape or ask you where to stand. And when a cop asks me, hey, could you take a couple steps back? I go, sure, officer, I'll take 2 steps back. It's really important that you make the cop feel safe, because what you're about is trying to get the maximum amount of accountability. So the least time you spend arguing with the cop, I mean, sometimes I get sucked into it, but the better. So that's a good rule of thumb.
So again, you mentioned the rules on private property. How could you relay that again on this?
Sure. If you look up, we are what's called a one-party consent state in Oregon, and what that has to do with is the fact that if you're in an area where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy, like a city meeting or city streets, anywhere that's public property, only one party has to give consent to film, and that is you. You're the one party. But here's the caveat. It's illegal to film on private property without the consent of the owner. So if you're on someone's property and they ask you to leave, they can trespass you away from the property and you're not allowed to film there. But here's a caveat. You can stand on a public sidewalk and film someone in their front yard and you're all gravy. That's perfectly legal. So there's no reasonable expectation of privacy in public. And I would like to also add that the Supreme Court has ruled on numerous occasions that it is a First Amendment protected right of free speech for you to document and record what police are doing. So I think I've pretty well thoroughly answered that question. Any more questions for me, brother?
Yeah, William's going to ask a question now.
Sure.
What about if you're on private property and your camera is seeing where the person is in the nude?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. If you film nudity without someone's consent in Oregon, it's basically a sex crime. So that's a big no-no. Do not film nudity. And I prefer, as a cop watcher, if there's a medical call, I do my best to try to film the person from behind if they've been hurt, as long as they're not police involved. Because if there's police involved, you need to, it's a moral thing with me. I try to allow people to keep their dignity, so I don't try to shoot blood and gore. But if the police are involved, you're going to have to make that moral determination for yourself. But I prefer not to film people if they're hurt and going into an ambulance, unless the police are involved, unless I think I have to provide an accountability role, and then I'm going to film every bit of it.
All right, and
Mike, just to get back to that. So if the lady was walking up the street nude,
right,
and you photograph and you were filming,
right,
that would be a sex crime?
I am not 100%. I know you're not allowed to film nudity without someone's consent, and it's specifically mentioned in the Oregon Revised Statutes. If you type ORS, the rules about recording or filming, you'll find these. It's pretty easy. If you're in Oregon and you want to know the answer to a legal question, you basically just write the question in the Google search bar and then put ORS. That stands for Oregon Revised Statutes, and you'll find, with just a few clicks, whatever point of law you want to research.
okay, and so I heard a rule, like you said, like how far away you had to be from the police, but I heard like someone say like if you're 10 feet away, that's okay. Is that it? Or?
There is no specificity. It's whatever the officer feels. If the officer feels like he's being threatened or in their way, but I've noticed after doing this for the first year, with a number of volunteers observing the police in a downtown central precinct of Portland, Oregon, that they usually let us hang out within 9 or 10 feet. As long as we're not physically in their way, they could really give no fucks. So hats off to Portland Police Bureau for not fucking with my First Amendment right to film them. But I would recommend, if you can still see what's going on, go ahead and comply with what the cops say. As long as you think that you can still document what's happening, I don't see a problem with giving them actual room and space,
All right, I'll try to think of some more questions.
Okay, right on.
And this has been Mike's Guidelines.
Yes, guidelines, not rules.
There you go.